Over the last 7 years, the Citizens Theatre has been through this massive redevelopment. And so we'd been talking a lot about how our own work in participation has been active the whole time that we've been closed. We've been in the local schools, we've got lots of ongoing projects and programmes, and we felt like we really wanted to, in the first instance, make sure that our neighbourhood of the Gorbals felt like they were kind of first footing the building, but also that our participation groups and the groups that we have strong partnerships with were a key fundamental part of that. In thinking about how Homecoming would connect with audiences sort of the past, of the present and of the future, we were really inspired by not just heritage as something that we learn about the past, but I think this growing knowledge of heritage is something that we create together. So we took the 6 iconic statues. In many ways they represent the fundamentals of live performance. So there's song, there's music, there's dance, there's poetry. The Gorbals has a really rich history itself of an annual parade with the Gorbals Fair. So we wanted to kind of borrow and be inspired by that. And then when we really looked at the sort of live performance elements, the 2 things that popped out to us in terms of sort of iconic nature was like comedy and tragedy, and that sense of how are we going to represent that. And then we came to puppets and just the beauty of what it is to make a visual statement outside and how we might use that notion of comedy and tragedy as a starting point to lead us back to the building. And it went from a moment of being like, oh, there's a couple of hundred people here, to suddenly, all of a sudden, feeling like actually there's probably more like 800 people. What was beautiful was that people were there at the start, but they were also meeting us along the way, people coming out of their doors and leaning out of their windows. And so when we reached the sit, we were met with a really massive crowd that then allowed the song to really land with a big community, and for our, 11 8 to 10-year-olds to perform in front of that level of crowd, they absolutely nailed it and delivered, I think, something really moving and really heartfelt. And then it was lovely just to say, we are the past, we are the present, we're the future, which is the sort of, I guess, the line that we've held on to, and we are open. What we wanted to do was make sure that we had enough activity that people could take in that really, really spoke to that heritage activity that's been built into the building. So, there's the heritage stories section of the building, which people are able to go and have a look into the paint frame, they're allowed to see the fly tower, like that sort of stuff we never would have been able to do before. So that we wanted to make sure that people could do that on their own terms. And then actually we had our own memory station. So really it's the beginning of a project that will be about oral history and collecting stories in a more extensive way. And I think all of these things really allow us to build on the heritage idea that we need to harness people's understanding of how theatre is made, both in history but also how we're doing it now. So those things felt really exciting, and we didn't really feel like we needed to over-facilitate them because they have been built into the building. I think all of us at the SITs are thinking about this is really our homecoming year. Like whilst we did anchor the initial activity around a weekend and then a few weeks, really there's activity happening throughout the next year that feels like it has the same ethos. So the reopening of our studio theatre is being opened by our Young Company, and then it's quickly followed up by our community collective. With Young Company, they've made a piece about the Close Theatre, which is an important part of the Citizens Theatre history, but their own spin on it, having a really good look at how radical theatre making informs them as young practitioners. So again, really thinking about that past, present, future. And the community collective are looking at, I guess, what affects them in their own lives and how they storytell as a way of exploring and explaining and community building. The Heritage Lottery Fund have been so supportive of the work across the redevelopment period, and particularly when we went to them and said, look, we think that the themes embedded in what we want to do for this opening activity, the heritage work, the heritage inspired, and that notion of being inspired by the statues and integrating, I guess, living experience with our desire for people to engage in the history of the SITs and its community meaning. They just absolutely went with us, and actually their funding and their support has been instrumental in letting us invite people back into the building.